Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Santa Monica, California, June 20th, 2021. Today is the third and final part, not the final end of the story, but the final part in this three-part series, a tribute to State Councilor in Burma, Aung San Suu Kyi, to the President, U Win Myint, to the thousands of other men and women at this very moment who are imprisoned in the various prison camps throughout Myanmar, a tribute to the men and women, the boys and girls, the nuns and monks in Myanmar who have died, been killed, tortured, assassinated, raped to death by the former general of Burma's armed forces, formerly known as the Thamada. And his name is Min Aung Hlaing. There is one man right now in Naypyidaw, in a mansion, decorated in a uniform and awards given to himself in celebration of the perversity of domination, destruction, dictatorship, and murder. He is no longer a senior general in the institution formed by Aung San Suu Kyi's father, the late General Aung San. Min Aung Hlaing, not to vilify him more than he has vilified himself and the people of the Thamada, the people of Burma. He is no longer a reputable member of this honorable institution brought forth decades ago by Aung San Suu Kyi's father, General Aung San. He is and should be known worldwide and throughout the civilized nations of the world by the people of Myanmar, who know very directly that Min Aung Hlaing is now a designated war criminal, a terrorist, controlling what's known as a terrorist council by the acronym MAHSAC. This should go viral and stay present in the minds, in the conscience, and in the dignity of all leaders worldwide, all members of the United Nations and the Security Council, MAHSAC, MASAC, the latest terrorist designation on our beloved planet. Min Aung Hlaing should be understood as the earliest stages of the infamous genocidal psychopath in Cambodia, Pol Pot. SAC, S-A-C, should be known as the early stages of the Khmer Rouge, the Taliban, Boko Haram, an institution of evil. And I'm stating the obvious. A tribute to Aung San Suu Kyi is to understand the context of the State Councilor, the Nobel Peace Laureate from 1991, the over 5,000 men and women who at this very moment, I dare not say languish, but they are political prisoners fighting for their sovereignty and their freedom and the freedom of the people of Myanmar, who are now locked, likely starving, deprived of medicines, food, shelter, legal representation by one man, Min Aung Hlaing, and the diabolical collusion of other men in uniform and women in uniform and family members collectively known as the upper echelon of the terrorist council known by the acronym MASAC. It's an oligarchy, a collusive oligarchy of evil. They are dictators acting out of the ignorance of their own DNA, their own psychology, their own conditioning. And I'd like to address the consciousness, the psychology today of Aung San Suu Kyi, the civilian elected members who are imprisoned or have been murdered over the last several months and decades, and talk about it as much as possible from a consciousness point of view rather than just simply labels and names. What's going on in Burma is a war on consciousness, a war on freedom, a war on the universality of human rights, the sanctity of living and dreaming and abiding without fear of incarceration, torture, and imprisonment. The people of Burma today cannot walk, move, write, interact, talk, do anything at all, privately or publicly, without the fear of persecution. Burma is under assault. Aung San Suu Kyi, in a tribute to her, is a tribute not to her as a person alone. She would adamantly refuse such labeling at this time, especially at this time, and speak on behalf of her own conscience, since she cannot speak, although her silence and imprisonment at the moment speaks loudly. She represents, through conscious choice over many decades, the will, the conscience, the dignity, the democracy, and the freedom of the people of her country. I hope this finds you well. I do encourage you, should you be motivated, and I would encourage you to be motivated, please share this video, share the first and second, as well as this part. If you happen to speak or write or fluently understand the various languages within Myanmar, may I encourage you, take the time, translate these talks, circulate them throughout the country, circulate them worldwide. They are timeless digital video nuggets of revolution in support of Burma's revolution of the spirit, the second great independence movement, their deep and ongoing struggle for freedom and democracy. Yesterday, I spoke and shared a story, several of them, but one specifically about my first meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi. This was in 1995, soon after her release from the first 6 years of her detention. A memorable moment that many of you know resulted in a book that we co-authored called by the name she titled The Voice of Hope. That book and my interviews with U Tin Oo and U Chi Mung, her colleagues who formed the National League for Democracy, are all contained in my books Burma's Voices of Freedom, produced and co-authored by my longtime colleague, Fergus Harlow. I would recommend that anyone in the world who has the finances to buy copies of these books, these 4 volumes, send them to your elected leaders, send them to representatives of the United Nations. They speak far better than I do about the crisis in that country because, as the title states, Burma's Voices of Freedom. A 35-year endeavor, primarily the last 10 years, since I've been unblacklisted. I was unblacklisted by the former president, Thein Sein. They represent the voices of the people, revolutionaries, elected leaders, all of them political prisoners at one point or another, outside of a few monks and one Catholic archbishop. They speak about the struggle to empower dignity and conscience and courage non-violently in the face of dictatorship and totalitarianism. It is clear, and I think all of us are very well aware, that today what is happening in Burma happened in 1989 in China's Tiananmen Square. It happened for over a year in Hong Kong. It happened in August and September of 1988 in the cities of Taunji and Mandalay and Rangoon at that time in Burma, known as the 8888 Revolution. It's essentially dictatorship driven by totalitarian principles to dominate the people through coercion, threat, violence, persecution, desecration, assassination, murder, rape, all forms of torture to subjugate the people to become slaves of the men and women who are the oligarchs of the totalitarian mindset, the dictatorial mindset in any given country. As in China with the premier, the sociopathic nuclear-armed, bioweapon-driven Xi Jinping of China, not the people of China. Ma Sak in Burma, the sociopathic, evil-driven dictator, not the people of Burma. They represent, they live and thrive based upon the collusion. Let us understand the word complicity and collusion. Adolf Hitler, to state the obvious, acted on behalf of a consortium of men and women at the top, bonded neurotically, sociopathically, by the emotion of collusion. The same in China, the same in Naypyidaw with Ming Online. There's 100 or 1,000 people who control the entire country. They control the money. They control the oil. They control the guns. They consciously manipulate the mind of the women and men in the military. They indoctrinate them. They provide basic human needs and enslave them through deep mind manipulation. This oligarch, this group of women and men in Burma, run by Ming Online, that right now, in tribute to Aung San Suu Kyi and the elected officials imprisoned in Burma at this moment, and the other men and women all throughout the country supporting the civil disobedience movement, the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the entire population that is struggling right now to confront dictatorship. It is simply 1,000 men and women poised against 54 million people. Those 1,000 men and women, run by the terrorist leader, Ming Online, are propped up, supported by collusion with other powers, banks, oil companies, plastics companies, manufacturing companies, corporate press and leadership. They are how the dictatorship survives. Pull the money, pull back the collusion, and Ming Online is a naked, impotent psychopath without power. Just like Adolf Hitler in his bunker, with his rescue remedy of a cyanide capsule. Just like Bosnia's Milosevic in The Hague as a criminal being tried for crimes against humanity of his own people. Ming Online is known worldwide today as the incarnation of evil. He knows that. His wife knows that. His children know that. They are so terrified of the people of Aung San Suu Kyi, their only recourse is to try to silence her and to silence the people through imprisonment. It is obvious. A war using violence upon the non-violent revolutionaries of the people, an epic battle of good and evil. Armed violence versus the power of the human mind as transformational wave to the innate evil of dictatorship. And each of us, in our own respective ways, I feel, can participate in Burma's revolution of the human spirit, the mind, because we love freedom, we love human rights, we love democracy, we love life, and all it takes, as the story is unfolding, is to understand Aung San Suu Kyi's very simple, powerful statement to me back in 1995 when I asked her, "Daw Suu, you call your country's struggle for freedom a revolution of human consciousness, similar to that of your friend Václav Havel, a revolution of human consciousness. First and foremost, each of us must take radical responsibility for our own fear, greed, delusion. And in that, we mindfully embody, with dignity and integrity, a non-hypocrisy of presence. And from there, we act for the betterment of all people who aspire for freedom and democracy, including the enemy." Now, she told me, you ask, what is the essence of this revolution of the spirit? You were out on the street listening to our weekend talks with Uchimang and Uncle Utinu. Allow me to remind you, if you do not remember, that every person on that street defied the law, the unlawful law of dictatorship by gathering in groups of 5 or more. May I encourage you not to hear alone. I don't want to preach here, but to feel, deeply feel as much as possible, so that we challenge any form of our own collusion, complicity with impotence, passivity, neglect, inability to know what to do, and to feel more intimately that Aung San Suu Kyi is our own sister, our own revolutionary mother. The men and women in the prisons in Burma are our own daughters and sons, uncles and fathers and mothers, our own best friends, our own people. And to feel them beyond nationality and religion, their incarceration is our incarceration. Their freedom is our freedom, Ubuntu. as Desmond Tutu has stated. In the absence of the South African concept of Ubuntu, there was apartheid, there was violence, there was domination, there was subjugation. Ubuntu, the ability of the human heart and the human mind to feel other as self. That which liberates you, I feel as that which could liberate me. And when you are elevated in dignity, I feel elevated in dignity as well. My freedom and yours are inseparable, to state the obvious, but so subtle are the machinations of psychology and emotions between us and inside of us that we often do not feel life as inseparable. Although we breathe the same oxygen, human life, animal life, natural life is somehow outside of the cognitive epidermis of our concern, our care. And yes, we do cry at times, but how rare right now. One of the most important things that I want to stress today in this talk, in a tribute to the revolution in Burma and a tribute to Aung San Suu Kyi, is that Ming Online is propped up by inaction about the world. Elected leaders, UN officials, good people around the world, he is protected by collusion through one's own psychology that results in personal inaction, that translates these circumstances known in Burma as something not irrelevant, but not that important to act by putting protective forces on the ground in Myanmar according to the 2007 principle voted on at the United Nations and agreed upon by all civilized countries to protect people from crimes against humanity, genocide, and ethnic cleansing, which are occurring in Myanmar for the last decade, 2, 3, and is occurring at this very second. And Ming Online is allowing him to continue based upon world apathy, impotence, collusion. Supporting Aung San Suu Kyi today is not about celebrating her virtues, but looking at the world community and our own potentials to rise up in revolutionary expression of being. President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, Premier Trudeau, everyone in the EU, where are you, United Nations Security Council? You lack ethical resolve. You lack wisdom. You lack empathy. You lack compassion. You have normalized the politic of apathy and profit and privilege. And it's called Adolf Hitler survived on collusion. Sociopathic, bioweapon-driven, genocidal premier of China, just simply labeling as a judge would in sentencing a criminal. I'm not vilifying them. Their behavior vilified them, to state the obvious. He, among his cadre of men and women in the CCP, they're in collusion, deeply indoctrinated in belief structures that are contrary to decency, democracy, and the universality of human rights, environmental rights. Essentially, they do not understand mutuality. They do not respect Ubuntu. They are without a spiritual presence. It's a war within consciousness, and either we fight for freedom within our own consciousness, or we collude with the evil of another being and a group, as we do in China, as we do in Russia, as we do in North Korea, and as we do in Myanmar right now. It's simply a meditative yogic act of revolutionary mindful intelligence to understand the machinations, the cognitive textures, the feelings of collusion within one's own being that supports I'm inspired, but I don't know what to do. I'm going to forward this video to a couple of people, and I'll go back to my red wine or my Bordeaux, my income, my book, my movie, my Netflix, my dream, my apathy, my collusion with evil. And just like the famous poet, writer, Lutheran priest, which you could never recite enough, Martin Niemöller, first as a Lutheran priest, they came and got the communists under the Third Reich. I was Lutheran, lived in Berkeley, didn't like it. Then they came and got the trade unionists, and because they worked at Amazon, it was like, don't like Amazon anyway. Then they came and got the mindfulness coaches. Well, they're so driven by their need for influencing and lack of training, I kind of got into my arrogance and apathy and like, hey man, take them off the mantle of pride, and next thing you know, they're walking to their death in the cyclone villa of extermination. We live on a planet where extermination has been an acceptable outrage to the decency of good men and women, but it happened based on collusion. And that collusion can be interrupted at any time. And Aung San Suu Kyi told me that day in her house, 54 University Avenue. You were there on the street, and it took enormous courage for these people to come out onto the street, to stand as you did in solidarity to freedom. Just hear that meme, stand in solidarity to freedom. May I encourage us, I wish we could do, stand in solidarity to freedom. Do you believe in yourself sufficiently? Do you believe in your conscience and your dignity sufficiently to rise up through any form of apathy, impotence, no matter what you feel? You can act for the greater good of the people in Burma, and just like the Reverend Martin Niemöller said, well, then they came and got the lesbians. Hey man, I'm a liberal, I'm open-minded, each to their own, but I'm a Lutheran celibate priest and just couldn't quite feel in myself the connectivity of sisterhood enough that that woman who now is going to the gas chamber is a worthy entity to fight for, to stand in solidarity with on the street in front of Aung San Suu Kyi's home, to cut through collusion, to give voice to freedom. But then eventually they came and got the Jews, the atheists, the Muslims, and because I was a Lutheran, I didn't speak up. And then eventually they came and got the Lutherans, and because I was a Lutheran priest and they took me away, there was no one here to speak up for me. I mean, isn't that the progression of deep entry into one's own self-respect and empathy, and the manifestation of the emotionality of inseparability and Ubuntu and shared life, that the eco-collapse that we're all in environmentally is an event that will affect all people, all animals, all trees, all nature, regardless of your privacy, regardless of your yacht, regardless of your privilege. The same thing with totalitarianism. And Aung San Suu Kyi said, it takes radical courage, not just ordinary courage, to stand for freedom. Let me pause right here, midway through. May this video go right into the inbox of the Oval Office And may all the elected officials there in the Biden government sit and watch and ask themselves, in conscience, if I were to confront my own collusion, if in fact I am in collusion, what will I do to support Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of Burma in their right for democracy, rule of law, harmony, justice, and freedom? One man with his group of advisors could instantly change the paradigm tomorrow in Myanmar. Just one person. And because he is probably contemplating what to do, when to do, if he's going to do anything, we must, as a world body of people, make ourselves heard. And so, going deeper here, I'm thinking just spontaneously, okay, I'm in Rangoon, and I am being asked to rise up in solidarity to freedom and revolutionaries. And I know that my behavior by going to the streets in support of Daw Suu, the civil disobedience movement, to strike and to protest, I am likely to be shot, killed, murdered, tortured, imprisoned, raped, or all the above. That is a radical decision, right? And so could I do that? Would I like to believe that I could do that? I would really like to feel that the truth of my conscience would dictate it is unoptional to rise up and to support my brothers and sisters in freedom. I'd rather die than cower in the corner of my collusion with evil. And so I'm thinking, I had this conversation with Daw Suu, and I had it with my late Dhamma teacher, Daw Suu's spiritual advisor, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita. Loved the power, the intimacy, the nuance of that gentleman's capacity and willingness to engage any question that I had ever brought to him in 40 years, to illuminate it with the best of his mind, his conscience, and his heart. And at times, if I could just say, in our conversations, in a book especially, what he titled Wisdom for the World, at moments with questions he didn't understand the answer that he really wanted to give in detail, he would pause, he'd walk over to one of his bookshelves, he'd have someone walk up the ladder, open and take a book, he'd point to it, bring it down. He would know which page to go to, sit back down, and read from it as an answer to my question. That level of detail. More to the point here, he was a radical supporter and fan of King Ashoka in ancient India. And those of you who know, and those of you who don't know, allow me to share a little bit about King Ashoka from what I understand, is that the word Ashoka, I think it means sorrowless, without sorrow, soka, Adama, Asoka, without sorrow. How is he such a great embodiment of noble, Dhamma-inspired leadership? Well, it turns out, give or take a few million, that Ashoka as king was diabolical like Ming Online, like his predecessor, Tan Shui, in his Ne Win. He was a Xi Jinping of India. that brutally killed and tortured many, 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 I think millions of his own people. A modern day Pol Pot 1,000, 2,000 years ago in India. He had a conversion. It's said that he had erected the most elaborate torture prison in northern India, the details of which are beyond imagination, maddening in its epic horror. He designed it, apparently, similarly to what he understood as the apayalokas within the Buddhist tradition, the lower dimensions, as the Dalai Lama talks about in his own way, the epic evils within this context known as samsara, that there's human life, manusaloka, dimensions of human life, dimensions of deva-like without physical embodiment, but beings of light, but distinguishable and separate, and then brahmaloka, beings without embodiment, and then the lower realms. Look at the diversity of species of animals and ghost-like entities that live in epic horror, unremitting dukkha, it said, according to the Buddhist Tipitaka. Ashoka created a prison torture complex similarly to how Ming Online has created and enact torture to the democracy people in Myanmar. What's new, right? China, 2.5 million Tibetans systematically murdered, raped. Human history. Ashoka apparently visited the torture complex. Imagine right now if we had a secret video cam in the interrogation torture chambers of insane prison, the infamous prison in Rangoon. Imagine. This is just words. These are imagination right now to help support President Biden, the G7, elected leaders around the world, the United Nations, the Security Council, to overcome their collusion with dictatorship and massacre, Ming Online. Imagine we had a webcam into a collective interrogation room in insane prison, and women there were being stripped at this very moment, and men were being stripped, and they were being kicked, urinated on, defecated on, and the military were laughing, beating, slapping. They forced the democracy revolutionary women to spread their legs. They kicked their vaginas. They started to bleed. They cut the nipples off of their breasts. They slapped them in the face. They began to scream and cry. These are freedom-loving sisters of ours. Da Su, a tribute to her today. Decades of support for freedom, and Ming Online and his evil henchmen like Ashoka in ancient India. Right now there's a webcam and we're watching it. King Ashoka went to his prison complex. Ming Online now is watching what his hooligans are doing, and they're gang raping now of those women in insane prison. Let's put our mind into that webcam and see that it's not a Netflix show. It's not a duplication of reality. It is real in present time reality at this very second. And it's happened throughout history. It's happened in Vietnam. It's happened in Russia. It's happened throughout Africa and South Africa. It's happened in Korea. It's happening in China. It's happening right now in insane prison. And Aung San Suu Kyi, in this tribute to her and the elected officials, President Biden, look at that webcam. That is your wife, who they are fornicating and urinating on and defecating on. And guess what? That girl now is dead. And guess what they do? They force the legs open of another woman. Then they just behead one of the democracy men. Insult me, criticize me, turn off this video if this repulses you. It should repulse you, because we're talking about the art of human consciousness and activating, as Dasu was saying, it took ethical courage to come out of your cave of fear to stand in solidarity, Mr. Biden, United Nations Security Council, to come out of your white, Asian, whatever it is, privilege and profit and all that you do to live in the sanctity of your denial and your collusion, to allow Ming Online to do the unthinkable to your daughter, son, and wife, and father. And just like Ashoka at the time of ancient India, he went to the gulag of what he had created, and he put himself in real-time phenomena with the torture. Imagine if Ming Online were in the gulag in insane prison and someone said, "You must watch, sir," and then they locked the door behind him. And he freaks. Well, welcome to King Ashoka. Welcome to King Ashoka is in his own prison. And he's seen what he created. And he fears. Can you feel the fear freezing your own conscience? That he could have the prison door locked behind him. It could be a military coup in ancient India. It could be a military coup in insane prison. It could be a military coup that imprisons Ming Online. We're only talking about consciousness here, not about politics. We're talking about human consciousness. Why do people do plant medicine? Why do they do psilocybin? Why do they do LSD? Why do they do meditation? To interrupt the deepest recesses of collusion in the human mind with evil, and to elevate the status of love, compassion, and wisdom and ethical courage. And when you have sufficiently evolved enough to support the freedom of others, Aung San Suu Kyi told me, it took courage for them to come out to care for people other than themselves. The first stage was to overcome their own fear. And no, she said, you must learn to quiver with your fear. You can never be free of fear ultimately, but you must learn to courageously live within it and act despite it. To overcome collusion with self and then have the courage to care about others equal to oneself. Ubuntu. I hope you're with me here. I hope President Biden watches this video. I hope it goes viral. Please be a force multiplier. Support Aung San Suu Kyi. Let's not pay a tribute to her. Share the video. Translate it into every language available on the planet. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Viral it out. Become blocked on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, because you're sharing it so frequently. Now or never. Burma is under diabolical assault. Well, King Ashoka just like you, just like me, had an eruption of conscience. Redemption. Every great religion understands, respects redemption. We have it in Buddhism with Devadatta. He himself attempting to murder the Buddha, schism the Sangha, a rival of his own family, the Buddha, goes to the Apayaloka, lives at this moment, it said, in incredible suffering based upon the lawful kamma and vipaka, causal Ubuntu effect within one's own self. Do and you will sow the seeds and therefore reap what you say, do, and act or don't do based upon the motivation of kamma and its effect, the lawfulness of this strange world of samsara. Angulimala attempted to kill the Buddha. Stop, I want to kill you. Ming Online, stop, I'm going to kill you, Aung San Suu Kyi. And the Buddha said, I have stopped. I have stopped my fear, my greed, my delusion. It's you, Ming Online. It's you. It's you, Ming Online. And it's you, women and men in Myanmar, who are driven by profit, power, and privilege, and money, and comfort, and security. And it's you, United Nations. It's you, Security Council. It's you, leaders around the elected world, who are in collusion with evil through your inaction. And you should know that you are aiding and abetting a mass murderer in Myanmar. You know that, but you don't feel it. So through spoken word here, the art of Dharma poetry, the radical aesthetics of in-your-face imaging, I wish I had the capacity, tragically, to bring in torture to this dynamic right now. Maybe I'll get a green screen and to complement the space. Turn the thing off. Abandon these live streams. But change must happen. No one spoke up sufficiently enough in the rise of Hitler, despite the books being burned and the ships of the Jews being sent around the world and pushed back from America, and 12 million, 20 million people exterminated and killed. Enough of these footnotes in history of mass murder based upon collusion that leads to inaction. This is a wake-up call. And I wish I had the placebo of a deep, deep, potent level of lysergic acid that could drop into the psyche, just like what happened to King Ashoka in ancient India when he saw what he had created himself in his prison torture camp, and he vomited, symbolically vomited up convulsive, purgative evil in himself. How could I do this, right? The change of consciousness, the biblical redemption of the own Devadatta, the Angulimala, the Judas in all of us. For God's sake, let's wake up, Mr. Biden, Mr. Blinken, United Nations ambassadors, G7, all leaders of the elected world. Stand up and act on behalf of Daw Suu, not her as woman alone, but democracy. Burma is now the next Tibet, and let us not be inspired by memory. Well, King Ashoka had a total breakthrough. You could call that he vomited up his innate, deep, unrecognized trauma, okay? Call it what you want. A convulsive interruption, Mr. Biden, all leaders, of how can you allow a sister, a brother, a wife? How is it possible? Don't talk to me about politics. Do not justify inaction. We must see action. King Ashoka changed his country. He had a radical redemption, became the force multiplier. The resurrection was what? The power of ahimsa, of the power of love, the power of Ubuntu, the power of the Dhamma. He had an awakening. It is our duty as nonviolent activists around the world to use our art, to use our dance, to use our music, to use our poetry, our spoken word, our theater, our art, our minds, our meditations, our books, our literature, everything that we do on the stage of the United Nations, on CNN, BBC. We're not playing it safe anymore. The non-normalization of violence. It is now necessary to throw in the ayahuasca to the entire globe, to have a convulsive vomiting of our own innate collective trauma, collusion with delusion and collusion, and we're saying no to Ming Online. A redemption moment for the people of the world. Isolate the evil terrorist. It can be done. Let human history be different than the history, just like King Ashoka, just like Seda U Pandita was telling me in our conversations. We need a King Ashoka who empowers Dhamma as the politic of the people. Peace, harmony, rule of law, justice. Where are you, world? And as Das Shu told me the story, if enough people come out, just one person, send this video to just one person, 10 people, 100 people. Send out Miss Gotterman's article that take action for Das Shu that's coupled with this video. Send it out to 10, 100, 1,000 news outlets. We are stopping a modern day Pol Pot Hitler, just like King Ashoka went to his prison camp. If I have the creative power, I'm going to create it. A green screen live webcam in which there's images. Help me out to become more effective in the spoken word. Theatrical, poetic activism, existential rebellion. We need to use the power of nonviolence to support the people of the world, because if we don't end the great apocalypse that we're in environmentally, politically, and financially, we're all doomed. Just like the Reverend Martin Niemöller said. Then they came and got the Lutherans, and because I was a Lutheran, there was no one left to speak up for me. What does it take, Mr. Clements, to act even more intensely? Let us find a million different ways, as Arundhati Roy has mentioned, to be a collective pain in the ass. Can you get outraged enough to break through your apathy, your fear, Mr. Biden, and stop playing it safe in your Botoxed, face-lifted suit of apathy and impotence? What are you about if you do not take care of the people of Myanmar at their time of need? An elected democracy, or letting Burma go like you did with Hong Kong and Tibet, in Tiananmen? Haven't we learned anything on this planet? Who are you? Who are you, Bono? Who are you, Bob Geldof? Where is the artist, the celebrities, the influencers that are saying, Aung San Suu Kyi represents democracy? Then they came and got all the celebrities in Hollywood. And because there was no one left to speak up for my celebrity, well, guess what? I'm in the gulag of insane prison. My legs are being spread. My vagina's being kicked. I'm being gang raped, and you're forgotten. It's a press release by the United Nations. Stop doing that to the women over there. It's just not cool. That is disgusting. Let's hear the conscience of 12 million Jews exterminated. We went to war with Adolf Hitler, slowly, but we build momentum. I am saying go to war with totalitarianism everywhere on the planet right now. Everywhere you see the machinations of that psychology of domination, slavery, persecution, manipulation through words and energy and smells and tastes. Don't be subjected to the propaganda of misinformation. Own your mind, radically empower your free thought, your free conscience, your dignity. Fight right now as a revolutionary. The war in Burma is a war of consciousness. It's being fought non-violently. And then they came and got the citizens of Philadelphia, Milwaukee, San Francisco, right here in Venice and Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, the Palisades, Malibu. They got all the wealthy. And because there was no one left to speak up, we have 12 million Jews that were exterminated. Let's just take a moment and listen to the 2 million Cambodians, the 20 million Indians under Ashoka's genocide, the 12 million Jews, the 8 million others persecuted, killed, and diseased and murdered during the war. World War I, how many millions? The Civil War? The overlapping wars and massacres of the American Indian, the indigenous of Australia, the people of Canada. The earth is soaked in blood, not just of the murdered, but it's drenched in the stench of collusion, of apathy, of separation, of the inability to manifest the emotionality of caring of other as family. Where is your Ubuntu? Mr. Biden, United Nations, where is your Ubuntu? Do not collude with Ming Online and his terrorist cult. Well, I don't think there's enough passion to be called passionate with this issue. I have a daughter. She's 14 and a half. You can be sure, call it what you will. She's your blood. She's in your DNA. Yes, yes, yes. But we have examples of people who relate to others who are persecuted and violated, who are not born through the womb of the mother, of your wife, your child, your family. That Ubuntu crosses the divide of normalcy. And there are those heroines and heroes like we see in Burma who act even for someone they don't know because of their principles. What does a leadership really mean, Mr. Biden? What does it mean to be the leader of the free world? Don't talk to me about I don't know. It's you who don't know, and you who collude with evil through your inaction, United Nations. Pointing a finger at you is not even remotely sufficient. And if I had it my way, I would drop metaphorical acid in the mind of all of you, close the doors, strip you of your pretense and your clothes, have a team of elder women from around the world who understand mothering, and have a collective Ashoka moment of him going into his own prison camp, his torture chamber, and he's seeing live, as they would at the United Nations, merciless gang raping through artificial intelligence of your wife and sister, your daughter, your mother. How about creating that kind of moment? I created it in this book, Extinction X-Rated, my attempt to poetically, through literature, create a trans Clockwork Orange moment of conversion. Holy fuck! Are we going to let the world disintegrate on our watch? It looks that way. But we must stand up and get in the heart of the mind and the conscience of others. Where is your soapbox, world? Create in a million different ways your poetry, your theater, your music, Beyonce. Create a song for the people of Burma and sing it freely. Directors and producers, create a film. I've got 250 hours of unseen footage. Netflix, directors, producers, call me. Make a movie for the people of Burma to save the world of dictatorship. The march of China's sociopathic, bioweapons-driven, genocidal, nuclear-armed Xi Jinping is on his Belt and Road Initiative. First Burma, then they came and got the Indians. And because I was an Afghani or a Canadian, well, that Modi group over there that are nationalists like Trump, too much COVID for me anyway. Clean the continent of those people. A scream, yes. Create a massive collective vomiting moment like King Ashoka in his redemption. We must rise up. We must do everything we can in this moment of need, this moment right now for Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of her country, the freedom-loving people of all ethnicities throughout that beloved land of Myanmar. The Shans, the Mons, the Rakhine, the Jews, the atheists, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Mons, the Koreans. Enough books on politics, enough talking about the machinations of a political intellectual debate about who this and post Aung San Suu Kyi and because of her age and all that crap. It's about freedom and collusion, and to overcome that collusion and help these people now, or no one's going to speak up for me or you when they come. And be sure, Xi Jinping will take no prisoners in America. Already infiltrated, like the brown shirts under Hitler, we've got Xi Jinping shirts in this country. I'm not speaking about the freedom-loving people of China. I'm speaking about the indoctrinated, totalitarian running dogs for Xi Jinping and Ming Online and Putin and other dictators in the making around the world. We must have and create a collective moment of redemption like King Ashoka. Make films, make music, make poems, create a catalyst that obliterates apathy. Give me a weekend in the White House with President Biden and the other elites, and I will bring in psychiatrists, existential psychonauts, women of stature, and myself there to hold space while you experiment with this substance in a meditatively controlled, elegant environment where you can hear these words through your own fear, delusion, your own prejudice, your own attachment to profit and separation, your own lack of love of Ubuntu. Okay? And you can cathart there in the Oval Office, naked, throwing up like Ashoka did, and you convulse, and we have images on the walls just like Clockwork Orange. Seeing Malcolm McDowell there with eyes pried wide open, listening to his beloved Ludwig Beethoven, his favorite music, watching his bloodlust of rape, and he is repulsed on a high dose of acid. Imagine sitting there, Mr. Biden. This is just spoken word. Radical spoken word, dude, at the United Nations, because people are dying. We've got the Fourth Reich manifesting. And you and them are in positions of power, and you do nothing. So I'm using the power of my voice, coming to the end here, which I hope is a beginning. And you go, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God, that's so wrong. Oh my God, look at that girl. Look at her vagina. It's bleeding. She's weeping. She's crying. They're peeing on her. They're defecating on her. They just cut that guy's penis off. That could be mine. Symbolic of my impotence now. I've been castrated. Am I castrating myself? Wake up, human consciousness. We have a moment on planet Earth to eradicate complicity, collusion with evil. And it's most evident right now in Burma. Aung San Suu Kyi, as elected state councilor, the most popular politician figure in the country, she is a symbol of what the people want, not her. She's the most recognizable name. But it's democracy. And we live in a democracy, Mr. Biden. We live in democracies, United Nations. We live in democracies, European Union. We live in democracy, and democracy is being evilly desecrated in Myanmar. And we stand in collusion with the totalitarian, torturing oppressor. How cool is that, man? High five me, okay? Evil to evil. History will be brutal, brutal, brutal on you. Or go to the prison camp, watch this video, imagine it's your wife being gang raped, your son, Hunter, being tortured, pissed on, beaten, and you go, unacceptable. You crossed the line. The rape of that girl is Pearl Harbor. You just violated the free world, Ming Online. And guess what? I am doing my Ashoka. I am snapping out of my collusion, my apathy. Thank you, metaphorical ayahuasca. Thank you, Mr. Clements. Thank you, all the women who held vigil in the Oval Office with me and the elites. And I came to my deep meditative Dhamma senses. Hello, Mr. Integrity. Now I am empowered, and I am going to act now. What will you do? Well, King Ashoka, as I come to the end here, sent his children all over the South Asian continents. And wherever those boys and girls went, they planted the seeds of exactly what Daw-Soo has done in Burma, of revolutionary rooted Dhamma. Dhamma in action, a revolution of the spirit. Thank you, King Ashoka. Ashoka, what does it mean? Sorrowless. An ancient Hitler in India. Ming Online. Will he become an Ashoka? Mr. Biden, are you going to be in collusion with Pol Pot? Hitler? Are you going to be in collusion with Ashoka before his redemption? Right there, that edge in all of us. Send this video to elected leaders, traditional media, influencers. Do everything we possibly can. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Translate it. Send the article by Miss the article in support of Aung San Suu Kyi, Miss Gotterman's article. Send it out everywhere. Send this video out everywhere in support of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of Burma. Let me conclude. This will probably be the last talk that I give in a while, because I've said everything that I've had to say on Burma. I have other things that I'm going to share. I'm going to expand this into a greater context coming up. I'm soon to be on the island of Maui, God willing. July 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. I'm holding an international digital gathering offered freely on FaceTime Live, 10 to 4 each day Hawaiian time, to flesh out meditatively practices, different things in dialogue with a group of people who are being invited, who may want to come in the morning, in the afternoon session, one day at a time, 20 people each day. Contact Karen Jeffries, the organizer. Talk to other friends on the island about coming. It is going to be publicized very shortly. It'll be a global event dedicated to freedom, the overcome of totalitarianism, and the challenge to the end of our liberty. It's not just about speaking sweetly about mortality and illness. There'll be a lot of that, but it's dedicated to freedom, overcoming challenging totalitarianism and our collusion with it. Be aware, tune in, tell your friends, I want to do this. It's the first time I've done this in almost 2 years. It'll be the first time I'm with people live in an interactive setting. It'll be a lot of dialogue. The questions will be repeated so you can hear them here on FaceTime. I'm so looking forward to a dialogue to expand upon the meaning of these 3 talks. And the reason I'm bringing it up right now is I want to close with the essence. The essence of this book is the essence of this 3-day gathering coming up. The essence is freedom. The essence is using our mind, our conscience, our creative dignity, and deep mindful intelligence, trans-religiously to poetically, spoken word, theater, music, art, dance, lovemaking, whatever the ways are, to give back, to challenge totalitarianism everywhere in the world and in our own minds. I want to conclude with the section of this book of an experience with Daw Aung San Suu Kyi that I began this talk with on Independence Day, January 4th, 1996, when she invited something like 400 of her closest democracy activists to her home in Rangoon, and I was invited, where they did a day of radical revolutionary celebration of freedom, human rights, and defiance of dictatorship. That is so rad that every one of them risked imprisonment, torture, and rape, and many of them were taken to the gulags thereafter, including Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, including U Chi Mong, including U Tinu and U Win Tain and U A Mong, and how many other men and women who were there and outside that participated went to prison, died there, tortured there. But they defied dictatorship. They collectively embodied conscience. I want to read 2.5 pages from my book, Extinction X-Rated, dedicated to my experience that day because it was the catalyst for me to go beyond my own meditative Dhamma understanding and to use the power of the spoken word, language and definition, and the poetics and the cognitive interrelatedness of the Ubuntu emotionality. How do you use words, time, space, auditory wave, particles, vibration, tonality, cadence, tone, space, definition, meaning, dexterity, spontaneity, love-making within the Ubuntufied fields of collective activism for the betterment of love and freedom in the overcoming of dictatorship? It was on this day, January 4th, 1996, that it catalyzed me to start a road show that I took on the road for, 20 years, called Spiritually Incorrect. I so loved theater, and I so loved the power of the spoken word to transform my own little sphere of love and meaning in my own little part in challenging dictatorship and totalitarianism. I'd like to read it to you if I can, and then close this tribute to Daw Suu as the final part of this presentation for the people of Burma and for the freedom-loving people, both alive on our precious planet today and equally for the unborn. I'm transported back to Burma. January 4th, 1996. I'm at Aung San Suu Kyi's home in Rangoon, a place I've come to know through months of secretive conversations with her and other revolutionaries in their struggle for freedom. I hear the sounds of jubilation in the festive air. Please go there with me. As a Westerner dressed in Burmese attire, I'm unrecognizable as I mingle among several hundred of the country's most prominent democracy activists. They're celebrating Independence Day in defiance of dictatorship, with gatherings of 5 or more a crime against the state and punishable by imprisonment, torture, even death by starvation and rape. The revolutionary atmosphere was alive with traditional theater, music, singing, storytelling, puppetry, and classical dance, and radiant with the people's love of harmlessness as the most effective means to fight totalitarian tyranny. I took a moment to let history transport her magic through the existential arteries of the past to embolden my truth today. Remember why you are here, Alan. To embody freedom or to collude with the ignorance and evil? What will it be? On the lake side of Aung San Suu Kyi's compound, the curtain opened on the makeshift stage, and to the joy of all gathered, U Parlay, the country's preeminent spoken word satirist, appeared. Many say that the seeds of Orwell's totalitarian classic 1984 was birthed during his years in Burma as a policeman. And my translator explained, U Parlay's performances brought new meaning to Big Brother, so much so that telling the truth was not only a revolutionary act, but one met with prison, torture, and often death. As U Parlay took the mic, I was told that he had just been released the day before from a hard labor camp in the north of the country. His crime? Satirizing Burma's military dictator at his last performance. And this was U Parlay's first act upon release, traveling underground from Mandalay to perform here on Independence Day, the very day 50 years before that Burma was unchained from 135 years of British imperialism. U Parlay continued, quote, "For 6 years, I've been pounding rocks 20 hours a day with leg and arm irons on, waiting for this moment to perform again. I tried to imagine his reality, chained at a crossroads for 6 years pounding rocks, without a choice of which road to take. Both forks pointed back to where he was standing, pounding rocks. And I heard his totalitarian master shouting in my head, 'Put your head down, Alan. Pound those rocks, Clements. Do as I say. Do not dare think of tomorrow or even today. Lift that pickaxe and keep pounding. And never forget you're a criminal and our slave.'" U Parlay continues, quote, "Let me offer a few reminders from our brother George Orwell. Although he lived with us back in the 40s, his spirit lives on today. He said, 'A people that would allow themselves to be dominated by corrupt generals, politicians, imposters, thieves, and traitors, as they do not only here in Burma, but all over the world, especially in China, Russia, and North Korea, are not victims, but accomplices. Although counterintuitive," he explained, "the greater the understanding of the beast, the greater the delusion, the more intelligent the true human, the less sane. Therefore, feel that staying human is essential, even when it feels like it can't have any result, and in so doing, you've beaten them." He goes on to say, "And if liberty means anything, it means the right to tell imposters what they do not want to hear, especially if they refer to themselves as a military general." "With that said," he goes on to say, "I know that today's performance will land me back in prison. But so be it," he says. "Freedom is more important than fear." For the next 2 hours, U Parlay and his mustache brothers dazzled the audience with biting satire aimed squarely at the evil of the military dictatorship in his own country and the totalitarian meme embedded in the mind of most every democratically elected freedom-loving leader worldwide. People laughed and cried and got up and danced in a revolutionary expression of moral rebellion, a virtue I drew from here in the house of Rocky, where I sit today to further fuel my own escalating war with fear and collusion. And sure enough, the day after his show, U Parlay was picked up in the middle of the night by the totalitarian military police and carted off without a trial and sentenced to 6 more years in a hard labor camp, pounding rocks with arm and leg irons 20 hours a day. That's Burma. That's Aung San Suu Kyi. That's U Win Myint. That's political prisoners around the world. And I met U Parley back when he was released from that second incarceration. I asked him, how did you survive? They can imprison your body, but they can never imprison your mind. Conscience, dignity, all of us, the King Ashoka, keeping alive radical ethical courage. Let me conclude. May I encourage you, translate these video, part 1, part 2, part 3, this tribute to Dasu, the tribute to democracy and freedom, translate it into every language and dialect in Burma, around the world, and send it around the world. Let it go around the world for the next 2-3 years until there is freedom restored. And let your voice, your contribution, your art, your music, please support the people of Burma as our family today. The message: rise up, stand up. Use everything within our heart, everything within our conscience to support the universality of freedom and human rights for the humans, for the non-humans, and for the life unborn. Let our lives be dedicated to stand and speak in solidarity to democracy. World leaders, United Nations, act. Come out of your collusion. Support the people of Burma now in their love, in their struggle for the great revolution of the spirit that's showing the world the courage to radiate democracy. Help them, support them now. From my heart to yours, thank you. And I hope to see you tomorrow for an ongoing series of talks and for what I'm looking forward to on the island of Maui, God willing, July 2nd, July 3rd, and July 4th in celebration of our own Independence Day in America. But a worldwide, international, freely offered 3-day digital retreat exploring freedom, the challenge to totalitarianism outside and inside, and to confront the end of liberty wherever we see it being violated. Let us do all that we can to join hands and rise up as activists of the human heart. Thank you.